Hey YouTube, the best way that I have found to amass a wealth of knowledge and keep learning about new things is through books. Today I'm going to go through 4 books that I think every product manager should know, have read, or be familiar with the concepts from. My name's Akash. I'm a product manager in Silicon Valley, and on this channel we talk about the skills and resources that you can use to amp up your product management skills and career. So let's jump into our first book, Inspired by Marty Cagan. If you're looking for a book to really get a intro into product management and the different aspects of the role, I recommend this book. I first read this book about 4 years ago when I was getting back into product management after getting my MBA, and this helped me refresh all the different aspects of product management. Just talking from a organizational point of view, this book is 330 pages long but has 67 chapters in that. And what that means is each chapter is only 4 to 5 pages long. That's great because there is a specific chapter of just a few pages on every question and every thought that you have regarding to product management. He has more than 20 years of experience at eBay, AOL, Netscape, HP, and more. So he knows what he's talking about, and this is a great book. The book is broken up into the different aspects of product management, covering insights from the industry, learnings that he has from working at different companies, talking about different parts of the product management team process, the product management skill building process, the product lifecycle and product discovery process, as well as team culture. I highly recommend this book. So that's Inspired by Marty Cagan. The next book is a classic business book, Innovator Solution by Clayton Christensen. I actually had the opportunity and privilege to take Clayton Christensen's class at Harvard Business School when I was getting my MBA there, and actually took it with him. This is the most sought after class in HBS. This book really is a evolution of his first book called The Innovator's Dilemma, in which he first talked about disruptive innovation and this whole theory of how do these big companies in any industry get disrupted by these smaller startups in the space. So I prefer the Innovator Solution because it goes through the entire disruption framework, which is covered in the Innovator's Dilemma, as well as adds on a bunch of different frameworks on top of that, which can be used to overcome that Innovator's Dilemma. The core framework in Clayton Christensen's books about innovation is the theory of disruptive innovation. And basically what disruptive innovation says is that every time a company expands and a company builds new technologies, they can either build sustaining technologies which improve upon the existing technologies on the same sort of trajectory that the existing technologies measure themselves against, or they can build a technology that addresses a customer use case or addresses a metric very different from the existing technology. And that type of innovation is called disruptive innovation. The disruptive innovation over time starts addressing, the bottom of the customer base and then one layer above and one layer above, constantly pecking away at each layer of the customer base. And for the big existing company, every time they feel, oh, we don't care about the bottom of our customer base because that's the least profitable, and we'll let the startup have that. And then they go on to the next one and the next one, and before they know it, before they can react, they've lost their entire customer base and they've lost their entire industry to this startup. One of the insights that really stood out to me and stuck with me from this framework has been that disruption happens not because of bad management, but actually because of good management. Let me explain what that means. When a good management team is really focused on the metrics that make them successful, they're focused on gross profits, they're focused on sort of prioritizing the top end and the most profitable customer base, that's actually what ends up being detrimental to them and what causes this cycle of disruption. And that's really interesting because most people think that a company gets disrupted because of bad management. You know, a really popular example of a disruption is Blockbuster with Netflix. So back in the early 2000s, Netflix actually approached Blockbuster to get acquired for $50 million. Blockbuster obviously passed on that acquisition offer, and Netflix went on to take over the entertainment industry. Blockbuster is now bankrupt and no longer exists, and Netflix is a $250 billion company. So how did that happen? That happened because Blockbuster was focused on their customer segment that wanted to come in to their stores. When Netflix came in, they flipped this entirely and they said, we're going to offer convenience to customers instead of variety and access to the latest movies. That was targeting a very different metric and a different type of customer. As the industry and as the customer base started caring more and more about convenience and less about variety and access to the latest movies, that's how Blockbuster got disrupted by Netflix. And that's a clear sort of example of the disruption framework that Clayton Christensen talks about. The book is obviously called The Innovator Solution. So he goes through and talks about ways that companies and managers can avoid being disrupted. This is things like the RPP framework, thinking about whether they should exploit existing markets versus explore new markets, what kind of M&A options they have, either acquiring a company for its resources or acquiring a company for its business model, and how each of those different acquisitions should flourish inside the company. It's an amazing book on sort of product and business strategy, and something that every product manager should be aware of, because disruption, especially in tech, is a constant battle and something that every product manager should be thinking about. Let me talk now about the third book, which is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. This is a book that I read last year, and this has been a very eye-opening book. The core principle of this book is that there are two types of games in this world. There are finite games and there are infinite games. Finite games are the ones which have defined rules. They have a endpoint. They have a winner and a loser at the end. Infinite games, on the other hand, are things like business, life, etc., which are not finite. They don't have a sort of endpoint. There's no winner or loser. There's no company who has won business. The biggest difference between finite and infinite games are the objective of the games. So in a finite game, the objective is to win the game, and there's a clear criteria for when someone has won the game and when someone has lost the game. For an infinite game, there's no winning and losing. The objective of an infinite game is who can survive in the game the longest. In the infinite game of business, the objective is not to win or lose, but the objective is who can survive the longest and who can sort of be in business the longest. If we look at business from that lens now, companies like Coca-Cola, companies like Ford, companies like Apple have been around for decades, and they are the true successful companies in business because they have managed to survive for the long term, keep their employees motivated, continue to meet customer expectations, deliver customer value, and have this sort of infinite mindset, which is really required for the game of business. Instead, if companies come in with a finite mindset that, hey, I just need to meet this quarter's targets, that gets old really quickly. And once the company meets those targets, the company will lose their motivation and they'll lose some sort of what is the eventual goal that they're driving towards. This applies really well to product managers. Every product manager is the owner and steward of their product's long-term strategy and long-term vision. And the fourth book is The Design of Everyday Things. This was my first book around visual and functional design. This was a book that a lot of people had recommended to me. So I read this book a couple of years ago, and the learnings from this have stuck with me throughout, and these are things that I'm constantly thinking about every time I'm in a UX review or every time I'm thinking about a new design for my product. In The Design of Everyday Things, the author goes through the different aspects of design, like affordances and signifiers, to mental models, and how visual design and functional design should map to how the product actually works. The best designed product is the product which can be used by the consumer and user in the easiest and most intuitive way possible. Something that stands out to me as great functional design is IKEA. Now, I know when you think about IKEA, you don't think about great design, but functionally, IKEA products are designed really well. I was putting together a bed over the last few days from IKEA, and something really interesting stuck out to me. Every part only has one way that it can match with other parts. If you put the part the wrong way around, it won't fit, it won't click, it won't sort of match up, which is an indication to me as a IKEA user that something has gone wrong and I need to change something. The Design of Everyday Things really gave me a lens to look at products like this and look at products in my day-to-day environment. So another book that I think really is very important and something that every product manager should have read and be familiar with. So those are the 4 books that I really recommend anyone trying to get into product management or anyone who is a product manager but might not have read any of these books. As a product manager, you need to be aware of the latest concepts and frameworks and always be collecting information and collecting knowledge, and reading books is a great way to do that. So best of luck. Let me know what other books you have read and what other books you have really liked related to product management. Leave your feedback in the comments below.